Welcome to a collection of some more mistakes newer players, but also some seasoned players make. And make sure to watch until the end, because there you will see a mistake that I can almost guarantee that you make. But for now, let's start with a few hands where the main issues are 1. Betting with the wrong type of hand, and 2. Choosing the wrong bet size.
So in this first hand we have a multitude of mistakes, but one prominent one, and we have a couple of limps, and the button makes it 40, which is 8x, so quite substantial the raise. And now we have 10-9 suited in the small blind, which in GTO land is a 3-bet, but not against an 8x raise from the button. Nonetheless, Hero goes with the 3-bet here, and the button calls. Jack 10-3, not the worst flop in the world. In GTO land, again, this would either be a check or a big bet, and I could hardly imagine a hand that's better suited for a check here. However, our hero does what I said is not even an option, which is a small bet. Button calls, as he should do with most of his range. Now the 8 improves our exact hand because it gives us an open ender now, but the hand as such is not any better. We still only have second pair, no kicker. So at this point, especially because the 8 doesn't hit our range very well, I would just check. Instead, our hero commits a polarization error here. He bets really big, thus only really getting called by hands that are ahead. I can only imagine King-Queen as a hand that we beat that would call here, and even that might fold to such a big bet, although it shouldn't. But apart from that, I think we are pretty toast if we get called here, and we do get called. Now the river breaks, the 5 of diamonds shouldn't help anyone, and now hero finally checks, and now the button goes ahead with a bet. He bets half pot, which I think at this point, again, what are his bluffs? Maybe king queen, but most of the time you will see a value hand here that beats you, and there is no value hand that's worse than our hand. So this is a clear fold again here, not for hero though. He calls and he gets shown the bad news, pocket queens. So this is now an online hand, but same concept applies. We have a raise from loose passive fish here, which is why I only called in the small blind with ace 10 suited, and the big blind also joins the party. Ace high board. We check to the aggressor, but now the big blind leads half pot, indicates that he is a bit of a recreational player, and the original raiser folds, and we have an easy call at this point. Now the flush comes in on the turn, not a good card for us. I check, and he now makes it half pot again. So at this point I almost folded, but I thought there is just too much air in such a player's line, so I just said I'd call here and probably fold the river to another bet. So I call, the river is pretty much a blank, and I check, and he checks behind, and he has 9-5 here. So let's just look at it from his point of view. The flop bet, well, half pot is not a good size to bet with the 9 here. I think he shouldn't bet into two opponents at all, but you could argue, okay, he's protecting against king, queen, jack 10, something like that, so I will give him the benefit of the doubt, although I still don't think it's a great bet. But then, once I call there on the turn, I mean, if he thinks that he wants to get an ace to fold here and he turns his 9 into a bluff, fair enough. Although I think, yeah, at that point he has to go bigger and then he has to follow through on the river, but I would like to do that with a blocker, with a flush blocker rather than a 9 blocker here. So I think this was just an overplayed hand. He just thought, well, I have a pair, so I have to bet, and then he even bets fairly big half pot, and yeah, he only gets called by better, never by worse with this bet. This hand here is another prime example of bet sizes being all over the place. It's a 1-3 live, and we have under the gun raising to 15, 5 big blinds, which is nothing unusual in a live setting. Hijack calls, and now here we are having ace-king offsuit in the small blind. So you definitely have to raise this one, but the question is to how much. So rule of thumb, you take the initial bet, multiply that by 4 if you're out of position, and then add another bet for each of the callers. So here, if we didn't have a caller in between, I would make it 60 or 65 even, and with a caller in between, I would go 75 or 80. What does Hero do? He goes 50, thus inviting everyone in the pot, including the cocktail waitress, to join the pot here. Thankfully, the big blind and the cocktail waitress get out of the way, but the under the gun expectedly calls, and hijack obviously calls as well. Now we flop top pair here, ace 8-8. Is this a reason to be super happy? Well, it's not a reason to be unhappy because we have top pair and a very good kicker. However, we don't really have eights in our range here, and the other two players, well, they might do, especially because we squeeze so small. But even if not, they might easily have an 8-9 suited, 8-7 suited, something like that. Also, ace-8 suited is a possibility, although there are not many of those left. Anyway, what should we do here? Well, against two players out of position, I would advocate to check range on this board. If you bet, you should bet very small, because you don't want to get a hand like pocket fives to fold if you bet really big, and you don't want to lose more money than necessary if someone has you beat. What does Hero do? He goes pretty big, 2/3 here, 100. I really don't like this size here at all. As I said, I would have checked range here, but he goes big. And although he goes big, under the gun now jams for the full 400 left in his stack. And not only that, hijack tanks for a couple of minutes, and he jams as well. And now Hero was asking in the Discord forum where I have this hand from what he should do here on the river. And the question is actually not even so much what he should do here, not on the river, on the flop after this jam and the rejam. I think the question is not even that relevant now. The question was, what should he have done pre-flop, and what should he have done initially after the flop was laid. So in this situation here, you have to ask yourself, because if you do get to this situation, you still have to play it, right? So you have to ask yourself, would either of these two players jam a worse ace? The question is yes, potentially. I mean, if someone has ace queen and they don't know what to do with that, it's absolutely possible that they do it. But then the question becomes, what does the other player have? Does he also have an ace? Does really everyone have an ace here on this board? Or would they do it with pocket jacks or pocket tens or pocket fives? I strongly doubt that they would. I mean, it's possible. Everything's possible in poker, but I don't think so. And because of that, I think this is an easy fold here. Even though once in a blue moon you will see a hand like ace queen jam, and then a hand like pocket tens not believing that or something like that. But most of the time you are beat here, and I would fold. But the main thing was pre-flop. That squeeze size was really, really small. You should go at least 75, and also if you bet the flop, bet it small. But I would advocate to range check. So this one here is another one where I have an issue with the bet sizing. Here we have ace-king again in the small blind, but this is the straddle pot for a change. Hijack limps, and now we have a decision here. Again, obviously we will raise A lot of players would go quite small, but in a live setting, this is a mistake because like you're totally out of position. So I would make it like at least the very minimum 50 or 55, possibly even 60 or 65. But our hero only goes 40. Now the big blind comes in, under the gun comes in, and surprisingly, the initial limper now folds. This is a slightly better flop than the one we saw in the hand before, simply because it's not paired, but basically it's same kind of thing. We can of course now have 9s and 7s, but we're out of position against 2 players with top pair, top kicker. I would check range again here, and if one of them decides to bet out, I would consider check raising. If we bet, we should bet small though, which is what hero does in this case, so I'm okay with that, although as I said I would have preferred a check, and we get called by the big blind. Under the gun, straddler goes out of the way. Here the 3 looks pretty innocent to me. If we started betting, we could consider betting again, but because we're out of position, I would just kind of be a bit in a pickle with betting here. Hero, however, goes over half pot here again. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if I love this, but yeah, okay. If you're playing against weak players, this might still be a good bet here. We get called again, and now the jack comes on the river. Now, if he has something like ace-jack or jack-9, we're now beat. So betting again now becomes pretty thin. But the problem is, if we check, I really hate check calling in this spot. So yeah, probably I would bet, but I would make it rather small. But that's why I didn't really like betting the turn. Anyway, our hero decides to go half pot here, which, as I said, I think is slightly on the big side. And then this happens. Big blind goes all in. Time to take a deep breath. As a default, I would just fold here, but I wouldn't snap fold. I would think it through. Let's think, what kind of bluffs could he have? I mean, 10-8 got there if he was on a draw. Yes, there could be some gut shots, but I'm not really sure about that. I mean, there are not many possibilities. And yeah, what about a set of 7s? Possibly a set of 3s, jack-9, a7, ace-9, ace-jack. If you count all the combinations of possible value hands, this becomes a trivial fold, like especially in a live environment where people just don't bluff enough. Our hero will make me mince my words here though. He decided to call, and he actually was good because the big blind showed up with 6-5 offsuit. So he had the gut shot on the flop, a double gutter on the turn, and then I think it was a good jam here on the river on his part if he gets there, but I think it was still terribly played to that point. Yeah, I really don't like how either of the players played this hand, and if you are a hero here and you know that big blind is capable of playing these sort of hands and jamming with 6 high on the river after he called twice before that, then by all means do call here, but against most players I would definitely fold here.
Okay, so now, as promised, the one mistake that almost everyone makes. Not long ago, I used to make that mistake myself, so watch closely.
We have pocket jacks under the gun, so this is an easy and trivial raise. Under the gun +1 calls us, then we have a bunch of folds, and now the button squeezes to 25. Blinds both fold, and here we are now. If under the gun +1 had not called, this would be a call or a raise. But because it is a squeeze, the bet that the button put in there is much bigger. It's not just 3x, it's over 4x. And this is a game changer. And as I said, I did not know this. I would always have called in this situation here, but this is clearly a fold. As you can see here in the multi-way pot app of pokercoaching.com, if you raise jacks under the gun +1 calls, and the button 3 bets you pocket jacks is a fold. And even a hand like ace queen suited, king queen suited, ace queen offsuit, they're all fold here. Pocket queens is pretty much the only hand that you can call in this situation, and you raise kings, aces, and ace king. And now you may ask, what would you do in 6 max if you open low jack and say cutoff calls and button 3 bets you? I have it here on the screen. As you can see, pocket jacks, yes, you either raise or call, but look, the small 0.01 there means that this is how much you are expected to gain here if you call or if you raise. So it's 0.01 big blind, and if you fold, it's 0 big blind with a lot less variance. So just get into the habit of folding pocket jacks to squeezes, whether you play 6 max online against tough competition or whether you play against weak players in a live setting. Especially the weak players will most likely only bet or 3-bet with a very big pair or a very good hand, so then pocket jacks are probably even minus EV. So just get into the habit of folding them and do not fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I have pocket jacks, I have to call.
I hope you learned something new and you won't make these mistakes again. And if you want to watch more videos that transform your win rate in cash games, then hit that subscribe button. Until then, have a great day. Bye.